Since the beginning of time, mankind has striven to double and redouble his powers.
Uh-oh.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Ultimate Sega 32x review here on Player One Starts. If you're new to this series or you're watching this out of order, this is actually the final parts of the Ultimate Sega Genesis review, Sega CD review, and 32x review. So if you're not a fan of seeing the end first, you might want to go back and watch some of those other videos before this one. That said, it is hard to believe that we are finally here. It has taken me almost an entire year to work through not only the Sega Genesis, but the Sega CD and the 32x. And I have to think, because of the wave of success that Sega was riding in the mid-90s, it kind of seems like right here is where the wave starts crashing down. And because of the awkwardness of the system's launch, the system's design, and what it was really even supposed to be doing, this was a very short-lived add-on. As such, it has a very small game library. There's only about 36 officially commercially released games that were put out in North America. There's about 40 games total worldwide. And as a result of this very minuscule game library, I am not going to be dividing games out by genre. We're just going to be taking a look at the rest of the games as they came out. And that's another thing I have to talk about, is that I can only review games that I own. And my collection, while it's more than half, I'm missing the most rare title on here, which is that Spider-Man game which came out at the very end of this console's lifespan. I think it came out in '96, about the only game to do so. So again, I'm just going to note that I am not showcasing the best games or the games that are my favorite. I'm just showcasing what I have. And perhaps if you have more experience with this console, you can let me know which games I should collect that I didn't feature in this video, and I will come back to this accessory sometime in the future. But that said, let's go ahead and take a look at some of these games. Knuckles Chaotix was released in 1995 as a side-scrolling platform game developed by Sega specifically for the 32X. It is a spin-off from the Sonic the Hedgehog series. It features Knuckles the Echidna and 4 other characters known as the Chaotix, who must prevent Dr. Robotnik and Metal Sonic from obtaining 6 magic rings and conquering a mysterious island. The gameplay starts out very similar to other Sonic games. Players complete levels while collecting rings and defeating enemies. However, this game introduces something known as a partner system, where the player is connected to another via a tether. And the tether kind of behaves like a rubber band and must be used to maneuver the characters throughout the different levels. And for me, that is the biggest sore point of this title. This mechanic, while some may view it as innovative, I view it as a game-breaking feature. Whenever I build up any sort of momentum, it always breaks down, and every time I come across puzzles where you need to have one character stand somewhere and the other one stand somewhere else, that is always a challenge to get them in the right spot, and it takes forever. But for me, the only saving grace of this title is the bonus stages. It is very much a shame that not more of the game was like this. I could see perhaps throwing in some 3D style levels on top of the 2D and giving some different perspective to each level. But considering that at the time they were planning Sonic's first 3D outing to be on the 32X and later shifted to the Saturn, I can see why they didn't include more levels like this. In the end, this is the only Sonic title that was released for the 32X, so your options are limited. Well, again, we are looking at Afterburner II. This game was also released for the Sega Genesis, however this version on the 32X is much improved due to the advanced hardware. This game benefits from the increased color palette, as well as the ability to scale and rotate several sprites on screen at once. And graphically, it looks very similar to its arcade counterpart. However, again, the arcade machine came out in 1987. I'm not sure how many people would have been looking for a home port of this game in 1995, especially when they were looking for the latest and greatest in technology. I think the biggest problem with this game is that it is trying to simulate a 3D effect at a time when gamers would have been expecting a real rendered 3D environment. I think that today's gamers may feel a wave of nostalgia with this title, more so than with other ports because of its similarity to its arcade counterpart. However, I feel the overall style and gameplay of this game is very dated. For me, personally, I feel that the difficulty is a bit high and a bit unfair, much like arcade action games were in the mid-80s. And while that would gobble up quarters in the arcade, it just makes me rage quit at home. I would recommend playing this game only in short bursts. Shadow Squadron was a space combat simulation video game developed and published by Sega exclusively for the 32X add-on. It first hit store shelves in April of 1995 in Japan, and the following month in North America. In this game, the player assumes the role of a recently promoted flight officer, from the titular squadron taking control of one of the 2 Feather space fighter crafts in an attempt to defend Outpost 51 by overthrowing the invading alien fleet across multiple sectors and destroying their sun-powered laser cannon. This game was met with mostly mixed reception from critics since its release, where some praised its visual aspects such as the 3D flat-shaded polygon visuals, as well as the solid gameplay and controls, and others were criticizing its lackluster presentation and sound design. Overall, I did enjoy my experience with this game, but I did agree with the lackluster presentation. I really do like the open-world style of gameplay where you can go after any of the enemy crafts that you want, and feel that this is a slight upgrade over Star Wars Arcade. If I had to grade this title, I would put it somewhere around a B- or C+.
You know what time it is. Yo, homie, peep here! Tempo, check it out, you know, he makes it funky, and he's good to go.
So here's an interesting game on the 32X. This is Tempo. In this game, you play as the title character, as he and his girlfriend Katie star on the Major Minor show. Your goal is to climb to the top of the tower to defeat King Dirge. The stages are presented as performances on a musical variety show in the style of Soul Train. The game actually uses hand-drawn graphics for their backgrounds and sprites. When this game was released, it received mixed to positive reviews. GamePro magazine noted that, even though the game lacked any originality in the gameplay department, the backgrounds, rich soundtrack, and extremely low difficulty made it perfect for game novices. While another game magazine rated it at 2 out of 5 stars, noting that none of its good qualities keep it from missing the beat and being yet another poor 32X title. And I do feel that is a bit harsh against this game. I would say it's one of the better on the 32X, and definitely not a waste of time to play. The only major annoyance I found with the gameplay is that sometimes the backgrounds are a bit distracting or loud, and in a few parts of the game I found it incredibly difficult to concentrate on what was on the screen as a result. Overall though, this game's unique visual style and concept I think makes it a hidden gem on this system and something that is worth checking out if you can. Virtua Fighter is a fighting game that was originally created for the Sega Model 1 arcade platform by AM2, a development group within Sega, headed by Yu Suzuki. It hit arcades in 1993, and it was the first arcade fighting game to feature fully rendered 3D polygon graphics. And I feel like this is the type of game that the designers had in mind when they made the Sega 32X. This game truly represents the next generation while still using the aging Sega Genesis hardware. The biggest problem with this title is that it was released in October of 1995 for the 32X, but it was a launch title for the Sega Saturn in May of that year, making it about 5 months too late. I have heard of some reviewers who prefer this game to the Sega Saturn version, but I am not one of them. Granted, it's not a totally broken experience, but I think most of what drives me away from this game is that, being one of the earliest 3D games, it certainly looks like it, and I think it plays like it. I would much rather play Virtua Fighter Remix or one of its later ports. Motocross Championship is a racing game developed by Artec Studios for the 32X. The premise of this game is based on motocross racing across 12 different tracks, while being able to attack opponents during the race. This game received mixed to negative reviews, with criticism on multiple aspects of the game. And I tend to agree with that. The controls seem a bit broken, the graphics are very blurry at times, it makes it hard to see other obstacles on the road, the soundtrack isn't that great, and it's just an overall poor presentation. If I had to rate this game, I would give it a 5 out of 10, and I think that's being a bit generous. Now here's another strange game. This is Kolibri. This is a shooting game created exclusively for the 32X. In this game, you play as a hummingbird, navigating throughout stages and trying to learn how you're supposed to progress through the game. The game offers numerous power-ups for the player's Kolibri. Each one follows different patterns. Some are spread shots, and others will home in on an enemy. This game features a good number of puzzles which grow increasingly difficult with each level. Again, this game received mixed to positive reviews. Electronic Gaming Monthly praised the game's visuals and originality, but highly criticized how the game restarts the player in a highly vulnerable position each time you die. I would agree with that, as well as the fact that sometimes you have to turn around and shoot enemies behind you, and that is a bit cumbersome and frustrating at times. Again, sometimes I feel like you can get enemies or even yourself lost in the backgrounds of the game, but it's not as bad as tempo. I think what draws me to this game is the uniqueness. Who would have thought of having a side-scrolling shooter with a hummingbird? Again, I would rate this at a B-, C+ kind of title, and I would say if you can find it, to give it a try.
It is 5 years after the establishment of the World Federation. Yet strife and civil war are still on the rise.
Now, here's something I didn't think I would see on this console. This is a fully 3D first-person shooter. Metalhead is a bit unique on this system as it does have fully texture mapped polygons. But as you can see in the game's presentation, there were some trade-offs on performance. And although the box art in North America states this is 1 or 2 players, Sega has confirmed that this was actually an error and that it is only single player. This game's levels are broken down into missions, though most missions are to destroy all of the enemies in that particular area using the mech's various projectile weapons. Reviews at the time almost universally panned the game, with many just citing that the gameplay is boring. However, others did attack the graphics and sound, calling the digitized talking heads laughable, and complaining at the raspy quality of the audio. Others said that it looked good, but is hindered by weak explosions and slow gameplay, with the player normally facing only one enemy at a time, but nevertheless deeming it decent. And I would say that's about where my opinion falls on this game. I'm definitely not going to recommend it as one of the best games on the platform, but it is unique enough on this system to make me recommend it to people who want to try it out and see for themselves what these early mech shooting games would have been like on the 32X.
Excellent.
T-Mek was originally released in arcades in 1994. The premise of this game is basically an updated version of Battlezone, however the arcade version added in network play similar to Doom. And that made this game very attractive in the arcades. However, since the 32X did not have any sort of network capability, the appeal was basically removed. Add into that the severely watered down graphics and overall poor presentation in my opinion, and I didn't find this game very fun. I would think that playing this 2-player would make the game a lot better, but again, the graphics and sound being what they are not going to appeal to a wide variety of people.
Excellent.
And unfortunately, that's going to end our brief look at the 32X library. There aren't that many games to begin with, but there are even fewer in my collection. Most of these games that I did not review individually either made an appearance on another Sega console, or were not unique enough for me to have an opinion on one way or the other. Most of these games are solid titles, and if you enjoyed them on other systems, most likely you're going to enjoy them on the 32X. The overall opinion I kept having of these games when playing them is that they didn't really seem to offer that big of an upgrade over the stock hardware of the Sega Genesis. Yeah, there are some things where I can tell they couldn't have done on the original Genesis, but I also thought there were some games where I really can't tell much of a difference. And considering that most of the titles that do take advantage of the hardware weren't really too solid of a title to make me definitely recommend that title over any other console port, including the Sega Genesis itself. If anything, I think this is just further proof of the old adage that better graphics does not necessarily make a better game. Alright, so what are my thoughts on the Sega 32X? Well, it had a rocky launch, it didn't live very long, and it died out a quick death, resulting in a minuscule game library that, unfortunately at its best, has ports that you can find almost anywhere else, and at its worst, provides ports that aren't very good at all, I guess. I will say this, the reason why I collected a 32X back in the day before I started this channel is I wanted to play the Star Wars Arcade 32X version. And why did I collect a Sega 32X to do this? It's because this game is almost exclusive to this add-on. So unless you can find a virtual console version of this game or an emulated copy of this game, there's no other way to play it. And me being the Star Wars fan that I am, that actually drove my purchasing decision to get this. But I am going to note that I did not pay very much for this add-on, and I would definitely recommend not overspending on this because it's most likely just going to be a display piece for your collection. And just to let you know, there have not been very many times in the 6 or 7 years I've owned this add-on that I have pulled it out to actually start playing some good 32X games. I mean, for me, there's just not a huge draw. Some games that I think stood out to me were Kolibri, Tempo, and yes, even Knuckles Chaotix grew on me for a little while, but that gameplay mechanic of just being tethered together just didn't sit well with me, and still, it just wrecks your gameplay every single time. It slows your momentum. Even getting good at it, it's just frustrating. So I didn't really care for that. So if I were to look at all three systems, the Sega Genesis, the Sega CD, and the 32X, I would rank them almost in that order. Get a Sega Genesis. Definitely recommend that. You can get a Sega CD if you're around the hardcore collector range. And you'd have to be a fanatic almost to get the Sega 32X, in my opinion, because that is a very niche accessory because that's just a very niche market. It's just only people who want to relive the 90s console war would be getting this add-on. So while I think this add-on definitely leaves its mark on video gaming history, I don't think it is worth it to collect it for playing games on it. Now, if you are going for that display piece, or you're going for, getting the complete Tower of Power, as this has been called, then yeah, you can get it, but again, just realize you're most likely going to be using it as a display piece. That said, if you do like what you see, please click on that like button. Let me know what you liked about this video in the comments below. Let me know what you'd like to see in the future. As always, I want to thank you all so much for watching, and stay tuned because I have more content coming. Again, I will see you in the next one. If you like this video and you'd like to help out with future projects on this channel, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Also, if you enjoy the content of this channel, please remember to click on this subscribe button. Again, I want to thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.